I want to take my house, that's a 1935 house in the Jamaica Plain neighborhood of Boston, 100% electric. I understand that this is what we need to happen across the board, not just new construction being electrified and not being dependent on fossil fuels, but existing infrastructure. I have no idea how challenging or messy this is going to be, but I'm determined to do this.
Hey, Jeannie, who's our guest on the show today?
Well, today we have Sue Reid. You know Sue, longtime climate warrior, activist, litigation, and now finance. I think if we're lucky, we're going to hear about Sue's house. Hi, Sue.
Hi, Jeannie. Hi, Bruce. It's really great to see you both here. I think I've last seen you around the context of some amazing folk music, and it's good to see you in the context of energy nerds.
Peter Mulvey and Eastie Farm.
It was so great to see you and get to meet those cool people. And we didn't have time when we actually came over there to hear about heat pumps and everything that you've done. But we're so curious because we're trying to fix our house, and we know a lot of people are, and it's not as easy as we would like for it to be. So how was it for you?
Thanks so much for having this opportunity to have this conversation, and great that you at least got to glimpse my heat pumps that I'm so terribly proud of. It's exactly why I went through this process and journey of electrifying fully my house, is because I wanted to understand what it's like. So I've been out there for better part of a couple decades as an advocate, in particular on climate change, working to advance policies on energy efficiency, building decarbonization. I've had a significant evolution from there, and now focused on climate finance. That may be a subject for later dialogue if you'll have me back someday. But so I started out having some knowledge, right? Having been an environmental advocate, having testified side by side with experts in the field to get strong energy efficiency policies in place in Massachusetts. And it's amazing. The Commonwealth is one of the nation's leader, often the leader on energy efficiency, but didn't have a taste for what that means on a really individual basis. And, I remember 15 years ago, occasionally taking a taxi in Boston, coming back late night from the office at Conservation Law Foundation, and a driver in the wintertime would be talking about their absolutely unbearable energy bills and living in old buildings with, no good insulation and spending hundreds of dollars a month for a tiny apartment for energy bills, which just seemed atrocious. And so I wanted to get a better understanding of this and really walk the walk in terms of my own footprint, which has long been an aspiration in every element of how I move through this world. And my house really needed some attention. And so I reached out to one of those people who I had continued to cross paths with at these legislative hearings in Massachusetts, the great Paul Eldrenkamp, who always had the wonky details about how it works in terms of energy efficiency investments and the payback periods and what good policy looks like. And so I reached out to Paul and his team at Bigmeister Associates and started asking, I want to do this. I want to take my house, that's a 1935 house in the Jamaica Plain neighborhood of Boston, 100% electric. I understand that this is what we need to happen across the board, not just new construction being electrified and not being dependent on fossil fuels, but existing infrastructure. I have no idea how challenging or messy this is going to be, but I'm determined to do this. And the lovely team there walked me through all the different priorities and options. And it's, for your listener base will not be a surprising gamut. Even for a house like this that's made of brick and stucco, it needed more insulation. So, blowing in more cellulose insulation into the gaps in the walls. Heat pumps were an obvious choice. Geothermal at the individual residential scale is not terribly economical economic or feasible for the vast majority of people. And heat pumps are amazing in terms of the value that they deliver and exploiting temperature differentials between outside air and indoor air. So heat pumps were toward the top of the list and a big part of the change with the infrastructure here. And we worked through the different elements of, I had forced hot water and thought, well, how are we going to do this without ducts right now? And of course, this has all been thought through by professionals in terms of figuring out how to install, use attic space, for example, install things called mini splits in different rooms where you don't have that opportunity to put in new vents. They're all solvable elements, and went through that process of being led by this team on what the design would look like, what the different components are. And the main ones are insulation, no brainer, real big savings from limited investment, heat pumps that are a little bit newer into the mix. I definitely wanted to get myself more up to speed before bringing those into the house. And then all of the other elements of energy consumption that were tied to the previous principal source of natural gas. I really was motivated to get off of natural gas. I had previously converted a gas dryer to electric, anticipating when the old dryer died, anticipating that at some point I was going to make this leap. So that was already done, but it meant getting a new induction range for induction cooking, a new electric hot water heater. And while all of this work was being done, finally getting a level 2 charger for vehicle charging at home. And so undertook all of this at once. Planned out through 2019 and was intended to launch in early 2020. But you can imagine coincided exactly with lockdown and the pandemic. We had some then new wrinkles to work through. So I feel incredibly grateful. The whole project did come together in 2020. And now, and I'm delighted to talk about this, I'll just a placeholder for now. Now I've been able to observe through a couple winters and a couple summers, including, incredible heat waves this summer, the performance of this house, the livability of it is so much better than it was before. Never had central cooling before. And, for very little energy consumption, very little cost, now have central cooling that certainly, especially the elderly dog of the house, who's 15 and a half years old and a built-in fur coat, especially appreciates. But I have to say, working from home, certainly it's appreciated here too.
Well, I'm curious about, you seem to be saying it's easy. And our experience is that even with, and I think you may have had special treatment in terms of advisors and access to expertise in the team. I mean, it sounds like you had a great team. We've found in our house that every step is somehow more complicated and interesting than it should be. So for example, we switched our gas dryer to an electric dryer, and the person who did it, he did it, but he grumbled the whole time about how stupid it was while he was doing it. It just made us feel kind of weird, like we're paying for this, we're putting in the electric, upgrading the electrical service, and we're paying him, reasonable hourly fees. And yet he kind of he literally grumbled the whole time.
Kind of curious,
why would any idiot do this?
Yeah, it didn't make a ton of sense for him, but there's that. It's kind of something weird and different. Isn't the gas by itself more efficient? We had to upgrade the service, so that was a big deal just for a dryer. And
we know how important this is from our work, as you do. And somehow I expected the trades people doing the work, the people involved in the project to be more supportive and knowledgeable and enthusiastic. And I'd say it's been a really mixed experience for us in that regard.
Interesting. Well, you've just given me a flashback because it is indeed you've had a parallel experience when I bought the new electric clothes dryer. That installation, I think I was literally told that I'm an idiot, which is, you wouldn't think what a contractor would say to a customer with the job in progress. But yeah, it was something very much of that nature. But it didn't give me pause for a moment. I thought, this guy's going to learn, in the years to come that this is the direction of travel, right? And I'm just going to smile along. He's got an important project in his hand, so I'm not going to pick a fight here. and then fortunately with this team that handled I think of it as a deep decarbonization, but really a full house electrification project. They really are experts, an employee owned company where, they really believe in what they're doing. They're tracking what are the latest developments. So I was very fortunate in that respect. And look, we won't succeed in terms of addressing our energy crisis, our climate crisis, getting rid of natural gas in homes. We're learning more and more about, the toxic elements of that. And there's so many reasons to make this switch. We need every contractor, right? Not just some specialized few that are at the leading edge of the curve. We need everybody to get on board with this, to get trained, to get educated, and to be supportive and to maybe give a little bit of side eye to those who are not making this transition, right? Especially when you have infrastructure that fails, it's a great opportunity to begin to make this leap or make bigger leaps, as I was fortunate enough to do. And, I'll say that even some folks in very progressive neighborhood where I live really question, really, you're going all electric? I mean, we hear that doesn't work in these cold climates. I mean, boy, are we going to laugh and you're going to suffer when we get down to single digits Fahrenheit in the winter. And that's part of why I would never say I told you so to my neighbors. Like, that's not a good strategy. But it's extraordinary when you add the insulation, and the effectiveness of heat pump technology now, not, heat pump technology from even say 10 years ago. It works exceedingly well, has been totally seamless. And like I said earlier, the cooling element was a big surprise, lovely element for very little additional energy, and certainly less than you'd pay for and consume energy for window mounted AC units. You have central cooling, and it's transformative in terms of then quality of life and so on. Again, while tapping very energy sipping technology, so you don't have to feel guilty about it.
Yes. This summer, for the first time, we also have mini splits. And I was pleasantly surprised that our electric bill wasn't that much higher than we've never had central. We never had real AC. So, and you have a good story, and we're continuing to bend the ear of that electrician and every contractor we've had since then. But I want to hear a little bit about, in terms of your process, what was the biggest headache or the hardest thing? And then maybe also maybe the AC is your favorite part so far, but I do want to hear, what was the hardest thing? Was it the rebate forms, or, just that the equipment wasn't available? I mean, the COVID is a headache for anyone, but can you name the big one?
Yeah, it's funny. And actually, even maybe I'm realizing right now, thanks to you, how fortunate I was that this contractor actually even handled filling out the forms, navigating those processes. So it really was all packaged together in a way that made it as simple as possible. I would say two things. It's funny. I'm a minimalist. This is a lovely old house with really good bones, and love the aesthetics of it. It was really hard to walk into this house mid-construction. I had to move out, right? Because it was whole house retrofits, and it had really old electrical wiring, like even still cloth wrapped wire in main parts of the house. Had never been updated. And for the insulation, they had to do it from the inside because of the brick and stucco exterior. And there were so many big this size holes in my walls. And I deliberately included the patching, the painting, and all of that in the project. So it was all integrated. So I wouldn't be left with a bunch of, Swiss cheese walls or, a big painting project after the fact. But it was really a little bit, unnerving to walk in mid-project and think, this really better work. This really better all come together, because my house looks, a little bit scary right now. And of course, in some of the closets and so on, they had to cut big holes in the walls to really effectively get the insulation in there. And so seeing that deconstruction in order to do advancement in construction was a little bit unsettling if you've never been through. I had never been through any serious home renovation project of any kind before. So to see that throughout the house all at once. The other element was I did have to move out. It was the pandemic, right? And I was providing some support to my parents who, had some COVID exposure early on. I was being really, really careful. So I went through Airbnb for a rental for what I thought would only be, I think, 4 or 5 weeks for this project. But but because of the COVID requirements, they had to downsize their crew to have fewer people on site at any time. That extended the length of the project. And so this dynamic of during the pandemic with all of this disruption, I think, I had all of these fortunate elements with this amazing team and really pretty straightforward process. So I was very lucky on those elements. It all worked out in the end. I have zero regrets about any element of, moving forward, having moved forward with the project, despite those kinds of wrinkles that I think, again, are pretty unique. I don't anticipate that that's going to be a common, unintended, side effect of people doing this in other circumstances.
Wow, I think you're right.
I think projects taking a little longer than you expected that happens, but COVID. I wanted to ask, did you is your gas meter gone? And was that a moment of satisfaction, removing your gas meter?
That was a moment of deep satisfaction. Yeah, having that infrastructure removed. And it was amazing how quickly they did it. I placed the call to say, this house is 100% electric. I don't want gas here anymore. And literally within 24 hours, they removed the connection and the meter and we're done. It was really, and that was striking, but look, I wasn't a customer anymore. So, they were motivated. Maybe they redeployed that meter at somebody else's house right away. But, severing that tie and, having observed, that incidents, everything from accidents with, minor explosions, they're so rare, but still, like, why have that vulnerability at all? And, the fugitive, methane emissions, it's a huge problem that my team back at Conservation Law Foundation had worked with Boston University to draw attention to and really advance the fixes. But getting myself out of that equation and onto clean 100% renewables by contract, and now Boston Community Clean Energy Program, it's extraordinary. I regret that with so much shading here and these beautiful trees in my yard, I wasn't able to install solar photovoltaic. So I'm still waiting for when I can be generating clean electricity on site to meet my energy needs. And so, not ready yet. I think the technology is not ready yet for integrated solar roofing. Tesla had been looking interesting with some of its products and designs, but I think, need to wait a little bit longer for that to really be cost effective so that I can keep my trees and also generate power, clean power on site.
That'll be great.
Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to see you and look forward to crossing paths with you, whether it's in clean energy circles or music or anything else. So thank you so much.
Join us at our field trip. Climbable's taking a bunch of people to Eastie Farm in November. So if you can make it, you can tour their greenhouse that is going to be totally powered with their heat pump, geothermal, right?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to see their geothermal powered greenhouse in the making just maybe about 6 weeks ago. It is an extraordinary operation, and Eastie Farm right in East Boston, just, hitting so many of the key challenges of our time, from building community to educating kids about climate change and urban agriculture, and actually providing amazing, nutritious, locally grown, urban grown produce in communities, and in particular in a community with the highest proportion of first generation immigrants. It is one of the most inspiring things I've ever had chance to have an exposure to in all of my life. And so really great that you'll be following up with Eastie Farm, and encourage anyone to go out there, check it out, and support it, because contributions to Eastie go a really long way. A pretty lean and scrappy organization that's delivering demonstrable, palpable results in building community.
There's probably a link maybe over here that someone can click on.
We'll definitely have a link. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that introduction, and thanks for being on the show. See you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for having me. Take care. Bye.